Hey guys, tonight we sail into the sleepy world of pirate cartographers. The ones who sketch treasure maps not because they worked, but because everyone expected them to exist. Imagine yourself aboard a creaky, tar-slicked galleon, the kind that sways gently even when anchored. The smell of sea brine, wet rope, and last week's salted fish wraps around you like a damp blanket. Your boots are soaked again, of course they are. And your quill? It's been chewed on by someone. Possibly you. Possibly the parrot that you're hunched under the leaky awning of the quarterdeck, squinting at a stretched bit of sheep's parchment, trying to sketch something that resembles the coast of Hispaniola. You don't remember if that big rock was shaped like a whale or a teapot, but you draw both just in case. You dab a little ink from a shell full of squid bile and rum. It's sticky. The map curls at the edges. Someone behind you sneezes into the wind. You close your eyes and accept that none of this is going to survive the rain, much less be useful.so. Before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd love to know where you're tuning in from and what time it is. Drop it in the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You begin your pirate day, of course, not with a sword fight, but with a splinter in your toe and a poorly tied bandana slipping down into your eyes. The captain barks from the helm about new opportunities, which usually means chasing another rumor about buried treasure that's probably just a barrel of nails as ship cartographer. Because you once admitted you could write your name without drooling, you're expected to sketch maps. Not real maps. Decorative maps. Maps with flair. Curled edges. A compass rose, a few scribbles that look like mountains, and, always, an X somewhere just ambiguous enough that the crew believes they might be close. You sit at a wobbly crate, your inkwell made from an old molasses jar, and begin the daily ritual of cartographic fiction. You have no compass, no charts, and no real incentive to get it right. Historians still argue whether any of these maps were ever used for actual navigation or if they were just pirate fan fiction with squiggly coastlines. The paper is damp from sea spray. The wind keeps flipping the edge over like an annoying little brother. A fly lands in your ink, struggles, and sinks. You nod solemnly, as if this is a sign from Poseidon. The parrot, whose vocabulary consists entirely of curse words and not again, eyes you from a perch above the map. It poops. You move your elbow. The thing about pirate maps that no one likes to admit? They were mostly garbage. Real pirates rarely buried treasure. Why hide something when you might never come back? That gold needed spending. On repairs. On bribes. On unwise purchases in ports with names you can't pronounce. But drawing the map gave everyone a sense of purpose. A goal. A story to believe in. Even if the treasure was just a barrel of sugar hidden under a bush somewhere in Tortuga. You remember once trying to make a real map. You measured distances with knots on a rope and tried to triangulate using the sun's position. It took all day. No one cared. The captain squinted at it, muttered something about too many straight lines, and asked if you could draw it again, but more wiggly. So now you just make wiggly maps. Easier. Prettier. Less math point one time. You forgot to draw a north arrow, and someone wandered for 3 days toward a palm tree that looked like a dancing woman, which turned out to be a goat. That man now limps and swears in 3 languages. The ink you're using today is clumpy, made from mashed seaweed, charcoal, and someone's leftover breakfast tea. It smells like regret. You try to smooth it with a bit of whale fat, but that only makes the parchment greasy. You squint again at the horizon, sketch a vague blob where Cuba might be, and call it Isla del. Close enough. As you draw, the sounds of the ship murmur around you. Ropes creaking like tired joints. Gulls calling overhead in judgmental tones. A sailor below deck playing the same 3 notes on a tin whistle over and over. And over. Yawn. It's a satisfying, jaw-cracking thing. Maybe you're not meant for cartography. Maybe your maps will end up lining a goat pen in Barbados. Or maybe they'll be found 2 centuries later, framed in a museum with an excited plaque. Authentic pirate map of the Caribbean. A lie wrapped in moldy leather and misplaced confidence. There's something oddly soothing about it, though, drawing coastlines you've never seen, imagining coves where ships might hide, sketching mountains that no one will ever climb. It's like building a bedtime story out of salt and ink. No one expects it to be true. It just needs to feel real enough. Someone behind you mutters, "That rock looks like my aunt." You nod. "I'll label it Andy's Bluff." He seems satisfied. You resist the urge to draw a mustache on the island of Martinique. The clouds shift above, and the parchment flutters once more. You place a spoon on the corner to weigh it down, then draw a big, theatrical X somewhere in the middle of the ocean. No explanation. Just a big, fat promise of something shiny. Someone else will find it. Or not. Maybe treasure maps are less about directions and more about dreams. A story you tell your crew to keep them from noticing the weevils in their biscuits or the lack of wind in your sails. Something to hold on to when the sea stretches out like an endless, sleeping blanket. You cap your ink with a bit of cork and admire your handiwork. It's not accurate. It's not helpful. But it does have a sea serpent drawn in the lower corner wearing a monocle. That counts for something. The thing no one tells you about pirate maps, the kind with dramatic flourishes and thick, squiggly coastlines, is that X never marks the spot. Not really. The big red X? That's more like a decorative suggestion, a motivational doodle, something to give the lads hope while they ration out maggoty hardtack. You've drawn a dozen of them by now, usually plopped in the most inaccessible part of the map, just out of reach, just mysterious enough to make someone squint at it sideways and mutter, "Maybe it's real." And that's all it takes. This morning, you're awoken not by cannon fire or a storm, but by someone tripping over your hammock and loudly accusing you of hiding the rum. Again, you shake the sleep from your ears, roll over, and feel something crumple beneath you, a half-finished map from last night. The ink's bled, of course. The coastline looks more like a centipede now, but the X is still there, barely visible under a coffee stain and a smudge of someone's thumb that a few of the crew are arguing about it already. One swears the X is near an island shaped like a cat. Another says no, it's a dog. A third just wants breakfast. You smile faintly and tuck the map into your belt. Even a bad map can cause a stir. Historians still argue whether any pirate ever buried treasure in the way stories suggest. Captain Kidd reportedly did, once, and immediately got caught. Most of the time, plunder was liquidated quickly, traded for repairs, drinks, or very temporary friendships. But the legend of the buried hoard persisted, and with it came a market for maps. Not to use, just to dream about. You remember once drawing a map with 2XS, just to see what would happen. The crew split into factions, arguing over which X was the real one. A fist fight broke out. One of the masts was involved somehow. You were blamed for poor cartographic conflict resolution. You quietly added a third X and walked away. Today's task is no less absurd. The captain has returned from shore leave with a scrap of gossip about treasure hidden somewhere near where the water smells like pineapple. That could be anywhere, or nowhere, or just the rum talking. But it's your job to make it real, at least on paper. You roll out a fresh bit of parchment, still stiff and slightly fish-scented. You begin sketching, vague coastlines, decorative waves, and a new X nestled in the curve of a fictional bay you name Whispering Tooth Cove. Sounds official, slightly unnerving. Perfect, you add mountains that look like molars because you've been thinking about the name too long, and a small dotted trail that loops dramatically through a swamp. Not that there's a swamp, but the crew likes trails. Makes them feel like they're following something important. A crewmate leans over your shoulder and squints. "Where's the waterfall of skulls?" You pause. "Which map was that?" "The one with the octopus holding a fork." "Oh, that one." You nod wisely, then quickly sketch a waterfall, just a squiggly line with a few stick-figured skulls. The man beams. "That's the spot, then." He marches off to announce the discovery to anyone still sober. Pirate maps, in a way, are performance art. They aren't about getting from point A to point B. They're about turning the blank page of the sea into something you can hold in your hands. Something tactile, tangible, bluffable. Some pirates reportedly carried fake treasure maps to pass the time in port, handing them out to gullible strangers in exchange for drinks. One tale tells of a shipwreck survivor who sold 4 different maps of the same non-existent island. Each buyer, eager for riches, set sail and never returned. Probably because there was no island. Or maybe because there was, and they started the whole cycle again that you've done it too, sold a map or two, especially when low on coin. You'd add dramatic warnings like beware the mist maiden or only the worthy may dig. It's remarkable how seriously some people take these things when you burn the edges and stain them with tea. Today's map looks good enough. A few curl clouds, a compass rose made out of a seashell sketch, and of course the big, theatrical X in the lower right corner, tucked between Widow's Crag and a suspiciously symmetrical mountain range. You hand it off to the captain, who nods sagely, as if he knows exactly what it all means. He doesn't. No one does. But he likes the feel of it. The idea that something could be there. The crew crowd around. Someone reads the caption aloud. Here be secrets. They nod, whisper, speculate. The buzz spreads. You step back quietly proud. Not because you've given them directions, but because you've given them a story that a breeze rustles the sails. The ship shifts slightly on the tide. The map flutters in the captain's hand, the parchment catching the light like a promise. Or a prank. Or both. You head below deck to your hammock. Another map tomorrow. Another X. Another journey that may or may not go anywhere. But in this moment, under creaking beams and the distant call of a gull who's seen all before, the crew believes, and sometimes that's enough. Sometimes it feels like you spend more time naming things than drawing them. Not because it matters. These places are mostly imaginary, but because pirates love a good name. Not a practical one, no. Not Southern Cove or Rocky Bay No. 3. No, it has to mean something. It has to evoke danger or longing or something deeply specific like that one tree that hums when it rains, which you absolutely made up. Twice. Today, the captain's request is simple. Draw a new inland route from the eastern jungle to the cave he insists contains treasure. What jungle? What cave? These are questions best left unasked. You just need to fill the map with things. Big, ominous things. Vague, suspicious things. So you begin. First, a river that snakes dramatically through the parchment. You give it a name. The Crooked Serpent. Very official. Then, at its midpoint, you draw a bend and label it whale-shaped tree. You've never seen a whale in a tree. Or a tree shaped like a whale. But it sounds believable. Important. Evocative. You can almost hear the crew saying, I passed the whale-shaped tree. We're close now. Next, a rock outcropping. Not just any rock. This one has to matter. You scribble a vaguely pointy shape and name it Sobbing Rock. Why is it sobbing? Who knows? It might just be damp. Or haunted. Historians still argue whether names like this had coded meanings for navigation or were simply inside jokes gone too far. You think back to the time a former crewmate named a mountain captain's chin just to irritate your bearded commander. It did. For weeks. But everyone remembered where it was. Your hand smudges the ink as you shade in a hill. Mossback rise. There's no moss. There's no rise. But the map is beginning to feel real. That's the trick. If the names sound like they've existed forever, people stop questioning whether they ever existed at all. A breeze tugs at the corner of your parchment, and a nearby sailor offers a bit of charcoal to replace your dwindling ink. You accept, and as you sketch in more details, you reflect on how this has become a kind of shared storytelling. You provide the skeleton, the crew adds the flesh. They'll argue about what exactly the screaming log looks like. Someone will claim to have seen Crab Hill in a dream. It becomes myth in real time. One time, during a lull in port, a bored cook invented the Valley of Whispering Teeth. You liked it so much you added it to the map. A year later, another pirate claimed he'd been there. Found a skeleton with 3 gold teeth. Swore it was true. You never corrected him. Back on the current map, you pause. Something's missing. You add a small cave near the bottom right and label it the Hollow. No more, no less. It suggests mystery, hidden things. The kind of place you'd either find treasure or a particularly dramatic ending. Perfect. You doodle in a few little trees, then scribble a note beside them. Beware the bark that whispers. You have no idea what that means, but you like the sound of it. That's half the art of pirate map making. Never be too specific. A fellow pirate leans over your shoulder and points at a tiny blob you've labeled Red Widow's nest. He nods like he's just confirmed something important. Saw that once, he murmurs. Whole place stinks of almonds. You nod slowly, fighting back a grin. This is exactly how the nonsense becomes lore that you've noticed this phenomenon a dozen times. You draw a feature with a silly name, someone insists it's real, and suddenly it becomes real, at least in the shared pirate imagination. Maps are memory. Memory is mood. Mood is reality. There's comfort in that, especially when life has been surrounded by salt water, bad weather, and men who argue loudly about whose pet monkey can arm wrestle. You add the final touch to the map, a faint dotted line that weaves through the nonsense toward a carefully placed X nestle between drunken Vulture Cliff and the tree that leans judgmentally. You lean back and admire your work. It's absurd. It's beautiful. It's exactly what the crew wants. Someone walks by, peers over, and says, "Doesn't the sobbing rock face west?" You don't look up. It used to, you reply. They nod, impressed. The lie sails smoothly on. In truth, the only real direction the map offers is forward. It doesn't matter if snoring Turtle Hollow is a pile of driftwood. What matters is that the crew will argue about it, dream about it, maybe even search for it. The map is a canvas for pirate belief. Each name a spell, each curve of ink a whispered promise of riches just out of reach. And as you roll it up, tuck it into a leather tube, and hand it off to the captain with the gravitas of a royal decree, you know this one will do just fine. After all, who could resist finding out what's hiding in the hollow? You never quite forget the smell of homemade ink. It stays with you long after the voyage, the ship, the rum-soaked songs. Because pirate ink isn't neat little bottles bought in tidy shops. No, it's sticky, unpredictable, and brewed with the same reckless enthusiasm as pirate medicine or storm repairs. And today, unfortunately, it's your job to make more of it that you've run out again. Your last drop dried mid-dash, snoring Turtle Hollow, and now the captain wants an updated version with fewer wiggly bits. Whatever that means, you set up shop behind the mainmast, where there's shade, fewer rats, and slightly less wind. Your materials? Questionable. One dried squid sack, 2 crushed oyster shells, a chunk of burnt driftwood, and half a mug of stale tea. Also a spoon you definitely didn't ask permission to borrow. Historians still argue whether pirate ink recipes were passed down, improvised, or just stolen from apothecaries. The answer, as usual, is yes. You begin by mashing the oyster shells with the back of your spoon. The result is a crunchy, chalky powder that smells like yesterday's regrets. Add the squid sack, which leaks with a satisfying squelch, and swirl the mixture in a tin cup until it resembles an unpleasant stew. Finally, add the burnt wood powder. For body, for darkness, for drama, that it's not pretty. It's not clean, but it'll stain paper and skin and shirts and the deck if you're not careful that a crewmate walks by, eyes the concoction, and mutters, "Looks like what came out of Jenkins after that bad crab." You nod politely and keep stirring. You test the ink on a scrap of parchment. The line is uneven, slightly greasy, and it smells like betrayal. Perfect. You recall other mixtures you've attempted. Boiled seaweed with vinegar, too runny. Octopus ink mixed with lemon peel, corroded the page. Or that time you accidentally used someone's boot polish and ruined a week's worth of maps. That one caused a small onboard trial. You were acquitted, mostly because no one could prove where the polish wasn't. Pirate ink making is half science, half superstition. Some claim eel blood makes maps more truthful. Others insist on dipping the nib under a full moon for luck. One bizarrely cheerful quartermaster used to mutter to his inkwell before every voyage, "No storms, no sharks, no smudges." He got all 3. Often, your current brew thickens nicely. You let it cool, then decant it into a cracked glass bottle once used for spicy mango chutney. You slap a cork in the top and pretend it never held anything edible. Then comes the quill problem. You don't have a quill. Someone borrowed your last feather to tickle the truth out of a prisoner. It snapped, dramatically. You consider alternatives. A thin bit of whalebone? Too clumsy. A sharp fish spine? Too brittle. Eventually, you settle for a jagged splinter from a broken crate. It's not elegant, but it'll scratch ink across parchment in a manner that suggests intent. There's something oddly meditative about these moments, crouched over your tools, your concoctions, your weird little rituals. You're not steering the ship, or fighting a battle, or climbing anything with the word yardarm in it. You're just making marks, inventing a world, one that probably doesn't exist. You return to your makeshift desk, really just an upside-down crate with a clean-ish rag on top, and begin to redraw Whispering Tooth Cove with your new ink. The lines are darker, wetter, slightly more unhinged. The quill splinter screeches faintly as you work, like a tiny wooden violin being tortured. A drop of ink smears near mossback rise, so you casually turn it into a suspicious bog. Add a few reads. A frog icon. Someone will love that. By now. Your hands are stained, your sleeves ruined, and there's a faint scent of squid following you like an embarrassed apology. You wipe your fingers on your pants. Instantly regret it. You pause to add decorative flourishes. A compass rose shaped like a crab, some swirling waves near the fictional archipelago of the Fickle Sisters, and a warning near the edge of the map. Do not trust the birds as a sailor glances over. Why not trust the birds? You shrug. They remember. He nods solemnly, as if you've revealed a deep truth, then walks away slowly. That's the beauty of pirate cartography. The more nonsense you include, the more profound it seems. Add enough fake warnings, and half the crew starts seeing omens in cloud shapes. Later, when you're cleaning up, the captain inspects your new map. He raises one eyebrow at the crab-shaped compass rose, then grunts approval. This time, he says, draw me 2 different trails to the treasure. Let him argue which one's right. You nod. He walks off. And just like that, you're back at your desk, swirling squid tea ink, dreaming up 2 ridiculous, but vaguely plausible, ways to reach the same fictional cave point. One will go through Needle Rock Ridge, and the other will sneak past the grumbling trees. Both will end at the same X dot, and both, of course, will be wrong. But the ink smells oddly comforting now, like burnt tea and old stories. You dip your makeshift nib and draw the first of a new, gently misleading journey. If maps were tools, pirate maps were gossip. Not navigational instruments, but canvas-bound rumor mills. Long before anyone trusted a compass or a captain, frankly, pirates trusted chatter. What someone whispered on the night watch could end up inked in a corner of your chart by morning. That's how today begins, with your maps serving as a kind of nautical corkboard, scribbled over not just with coastlines, but with complaints, jokes, and thinly veiled accusations. You sit at your usual spot, a crate nailed to the deck, quill in one hand, a strip of salt pork in the other. Your most recent creation lies open before you, a map of the sunken triangle, a place that doesn't exist except in the minds of 3 drunken crewmates who are certain they saw an island vanish into the sea. You added it, of course, not because it's real, but because they believe it is. Pirate maps, over time, become layered with notes in different hands. Little messages appear around the edges, written during night shifts or moments of boredom. One corner reads, in crude block letters, tell Jenkins to stop stealing hammocks. Another has a drawing of a chicken in a tricorn hat. You didn't draw that, but now it's part of the map. Historians still debate whether these annotations were practical warnings about reefs and currents, personal grudges and jokes, or something in between. Some maps from the golden age of piracy survive with doodles in the margins. Tiny ships with faces, sea monsters wearing boots, cryptic riddles that seem like drunken poetry. And every now and then, a detailed record of who really broke the rum barrel. You run your finger along the edge of your latest chart and find a note you don't remember adding. X moved. It knows. You pause. How about a joke? Probably. Or something stranger. But you leave it. It adds flavor. This kind of marginalia, the pirate equivalent of forum threads, carries its own authority. A map's edge might include legends like, don't sleep near Crab Hill. Too many eyes. As for Esme in Isla de Leon, she has the compass. Saw my ex near the hollow. Avoid. You've started adding some of your own when no one's looking. Half warnings, half poetry. Stuff like, Winds sleep near the red sand, or where the rocks hiss, you're close. You never explain them. You don't have to. The less sense it makes, the more the crew trusts it. Today, the quartermaster stops by. He's holding a tin cup of something vaguely beige and asks if you can mark where the shouting ghosts live. You blink. Which ghosts? He grunts. The loud ones, near the coral reef. You nod slowly and, without hesitating, draw a tiny lighthouse near the map's bottom right. Around it, you sketch jagged reefs, a faint skull in the waves, and the label, Ghost Shoals, very rude. He nods back, deeply satisfied, and walks away, sipping his beige beverage. Later, two junior crew members argue over a doodle someone added beside the compass rose. It's a small, wobbly drawing of what appears to be a lizard smoking a pipe. One swears it's a coded warning about heat stroke. The other insists it's Captain Squint's lost familiar. You let them debate. You don't even see a pipe. The map is alive now. Not accurate, not clean, but absolutely alive. Every time someone interacts with it, it grows. Gets stranger, funnier, heavier with meaning. Some pirates claim a truly lucky map doesn't show places at all. It shows paths. Possibilities. Things that might happen if you follow the dotted line, if you avoid the laughing reef, if you take the left trail at the tree that sings sometimes. That's the kind of map yours is turning into. You don't even need to invent everything anymore. The crew fills in the blanks. You draw a crooked hill, and by lunch someone swears it's haunted. By supper, someone else claims it leads to a cave full of emeralds. By dawn, they're planning a landing party. You glance at one of the newer entries scrawled in charcoal on the border. Fishman says go left. There is no fishman. Probably. The cook wanders over, squints at your handiwork, and offers a single comment. You spell bay with two ES. You smile. That's the old spelling. He nods slowly, eyes narrowed, then shrugs and tosses you half a sweet biscuit. Your reward for creativity, evidently, in a way, the map is a diary. Not of your life, but of the ship's. A drifting chronicle of its arguments, jokes, false hopes, and meals gone wrong. There's even a stain in one corner from when someone sneezed explosively while holding a hot mug of seaweed broth. You left it there. Labeled it Thermal Spring. No one's questioned IT.by evening. You've added 3 new features. The Ringing Marsh, Bones of the Snoring Saint, and Port Squawk. None of them are real. But by morning, someone will swear they've seen all 3. The lanterns flicker and the ocean hums beneath the hull. You roll up the map and tuck it under your arm. Another day of art, nonsense, and gentle manipulation complete. The crew believes in the map, and that really is all that matters. There are few things more dangerous than a pirate with a memory full of rum and a firm belief in a place that never existed. That's how you end up with lost islands. Whole land masses, completely fictional, charting their way onto maps because someone swore they saw a coconut tree where no coconut tree should be. That you're sketching one such phantom right now. That IT begins, as usual, with a story. A deckhand claims that on the voyage south past Martinique, he saw an island shaped like a screaming eel, covered in purple moss and echoing with drums. You ask if anyone else saw it. He says no. You ask how much he drank that day. He says not much. You nod, and then you draw it anyway. You give it jagged edges. A spooky little bay. A volcano, because why not? You name it Isla del Velo, which means Island of the Veil, or close enough. Spanish isn't your strength, but mystique is. Historians still argue whether these lost islands were the result of mirages, wishful thinking, or navigational error. Or if maybe, just maybe, pirates knew full well they were drawing nonsense and did it on purpose to confuse others. A decoy, a trap, a joke only the crew was in on. You suspect it was all of the above. That in fact, you remember when Captain Harlow once made an entire voyage looking for Smoky Tooth Island. 5 weeks of sailing in circles. Turned out it was a burn mark on the corner of a folded map. You kept that burn mark, turned it into a bay, and gave it a lighthouse. Now, everyone talks about Smoky Tooth like it's real. You even heard a port side ballad once. But the true beauty of lost islands isn't how they confuse. It's how they inspire. You draw Isla del Velo with care. At a temple, crumbled. A narrow ridge, dangerous. Some kind of fruit grove, potentially carnivorous. The crew gathers around slowly, intrigued. One mutters that his cousin disappeared around there. Another swears his parrot screamed the island's name in its sleep. Soon, two crewmates are arguing about whether the eastern cliffs are climbable. One says yes, one says only with goat shoes. You don't ask what goat shoes are. You just smile and add a note to the margin. Eastern cliffs, scale with care, or goats. By midday, your fictional island has a full biography. A lost priesthood, a sacred drum, a particular kind of glowing beetle that guides the way through the jungle. None of it is real. All of it is cherished. Point one sailor, even volunteers to lead an expedition. As soon as we find it, he says, standing tall, I'll go ashore. You nod solemnly and draw a tiny X on the far side of the island. Not too obvious. Just enough that there's precedent, of course. Port legends tell of Sandy Hook, which vanished from charts in the 1680s, or the Nine Sisters, a string of rocky outcrops supposedly guarded by sea witches who tax passing ships with bad dreams. You once tried to plot them. The result looked like a fried eel, so you labeled it caution, disturbing shape, and moved on. Your favorite, though, remains Gasping Isle, a complete fabrication. You made it during a week-long quarantine after the entire crew got sea cabbage poisoning. The captain insisted on a morale boost. You invented an island full of silver bananas and birds that whispered compliments. The crew still asks if they're close to it that today's creation, Isla del Velo, now has two river systems, one cave system, and a mysterious set of dots labeled only as the Watching Stones. Someone asks what they mean. You just say, you'll know when you see them. The map is passed around during dinner. It's already smudged with stew and excitement. The crew debates tactics. Should they approach from the south? What if the fog is real? What if the moss sings? The answers don't matter. What matters is that they're talking, planning, dreaming. You look around the firelight-lit deck and see something rare. Pirates imagining a future. Most maps are meant to get you home. Pirate maps? They're about getting away from boredom, from storms, from the creeping truth that life at sea is mostly just wet waiting. Point one last touch. You draw a small, unmarked symbol on the far northwest edge of the island. A triangle within a circle, just enough to cause confusion and wild theories. You don't explain it. Not now. Maybe not ever. Someone will assign it meaning. Someone always does. And if a rival crew ever gets hold of this map, let them search. Let them spend weeks chasing shadows that you'll be far away by then, smiling. There's a special kind of map no one ever talks about, the revenge map. It doesn't chart islands, treasure, or routes. It charts grievances, slights, petty arguments, stolen boots, forgotten birthdays. And in pirate culture, where grudges age like grog in the sun, these maps are surprisingly common that you've drawn a few yourself. In fact, you're drawing one now that it began innocently. Jenkins ate your last candied lime. You were saving it, had your name on it. So instead of arguing, again, you do what you do best. You make a map about it. You start by sketching an imaginary island shaped like Jenkins's head. A bit lumpy, hair in the wrong places. You name it Isle of Betrayal. You don't mention Jenkins, but everyone knows. Then you add treacherous features. Sour fruit swamp. The hills of disappointment. A quicksand pit called Sticky Regret. And at the center, a grand pit labeled the Lime Heist Cavern. It's dramatic. It's childish. It's cathartic. Historians still argue whether some historical pirate maps were veiled expressions of personal vendettas, coded references to rival crews, jealous lovers, or that one ship's cook who served pickled eel 6 nights in a row. Some believe maps were passed between crews like poison pen letters, half directions, half insults. You suspect they're right, that on today's revenge map, you draw a giant fruit tree near the cavern. But all the fruit has been picked, with one lone lime remaining. A skeletal hand reaches for it from beneath. You label it in tiny script for those who take what isn't theirs. A nearby crewmate peers over. Looks cursed, he mutters, deeply. You reply, word spreads. Soon, half the crew is gathered around, inventing their own backstory. Someone suggests the lime gives eternal youth. Another says it turns your insides into bugs. You offer no clarification. The mystery is far too satisfying to be why mid-afternoon, Jenkins himself is studying the map. He squints at the lime tree, then at you. He says nothing, but later, he quietly leaves a new lime candy by your hammock. Map. Mission. Accomplished, but the revenge map has already taken on a life of its own. The bosun now claims he dreamed of the sticky regret pit. The navigator swears Hills of Disappointment is a known landmark on the Western Passage. You roll with it. You even start planning a secondary version, a counter-revenge map, in case Jenkins retaliates. Revenge maps have a long tradition. There's talk of Black Bart once charting a reef in the shape of a former first mate's crooked nose. A Dutch pirate named Griselda supposedly renamed every island she raided after ex-lovers and sank a ship near Heartache Reef. You admire that energy. Some say real treasure maps are actually revenge maps in disguise. They weren't meant to be followed. They were meant to mock, to send greedy fools off on endless wild goose chases. You like that theory. Back on your map, you draw a distant landmass labeled Reconciliation Point. It's hard to reach, surrounded by whirlpools and giant sea crabs. You want the message to be clear. Forgiveness is possible, but extremely inconvenient. A bored sailor suggests you add a volcano. You do. You name it Mount Overreaction. It erupts every Thursday as the sun sets. You embellish the final corner. The straits of miscommunication. Narrow. Dangerous. Very dramatic. By now, the map is a full emotional saga. Less geography, more passive aggression. And it's beautiful. The crew treats it like any other map, holding it up to the light, arguing over routes, speculating about supplies needed to reach the Lime Heist Cavern. No one really intends to follow it. That's not the point. The point is that you've turned a petty frustration into a living artifact, a shared experience, a joke, a warning, maybe even a teaching tool, depending on how Jenkins feels tomorrow. You tuck the finished map into your satchel. You may bring it out again. You may not. Either way, you've added a new genre to your collection. And in the pirate world, where grudges are as constant as the tide, you suspect revenge maps will never go out of style. There's a trick to burying treasure that no one tells you. It's mostly for the drama. Pirates didn't bury treasure because it was convenient. They buried it because it felt like a story, a performance. The kind of tale you could tell with a glint in your eye and a mysterious map in your boot that, it follows, naturally, that most buried treasure maps were equally theatrical that you've been asked to draft one such masterpiece. The captain, flushed with rum and optimism, has decided to bury a modest hoard. A silver spoon, 2 lockets of debatable origin, and an oddly aggressive porcelain cat. Why? To keep the legend alive, he says, and confuse the Spanish. You nod. Of course. The chosen hiding spot is a narrow cove with too many mosquitoes and exactly one suspiciously flat rock. It's not remote, it's not secure, and it's already been claimed by 3 different herons. Perfect. You take measurements or pretend to. Pirate measurements are famously flexible. One crew's 30 paces due west is another somewhere near that stump that looks like Jenkins if you squint. Historians still argue whether any authentic treasure maps from the golden age of piracy actually survive. The consensus? Probably not. Most pirates didn't live long enough to retrieve their buried loot, let alone draw it neatly for future generations. And if they did, odds of the map was less parchment and more scratched into a barrel lid and thrown in trunk. Back to your task. You draw the coast, curving gently like a sleeping eel. Then, a trail deliberately meandering. You add 3 false landmarks. Whistler's Tree, not a tree. The echoing stump doesn't echo. And Crab Rock, actually just a crab that won't move. At the end, you plant the big red X. Then comes the fun part. The clues. You write them in flowing script, riddled with vague warnings and unnecessarily poetic phrasing. For where the heron screams at dawn, take 13 steps past the thorn. Where shadows stretch but do not bite, the treasure sleeps out of sight. Did I it helpful? Not in the slightest. It compelling? Absolutely. You add a compass rose shaped like a dagger and label north as upish. That should throw off any rival crews. Point when the junior pirates watches you work, awestruck. How do you know where to put the stump? He asks. You lean in and whisper, the stump tells me. He gasps. You wink. Later, the captain buries the hoard in full ceremony. There's a speech, a toast. The porcelain cat is wrapped in a scarf and lowered with reverence. Jenkins hums a sea shanty entirely off-key. The map is then handed to you for safekeeping. But of course, you don't just keep one copy. You create several, each slightly different. One has an extra clue. One's written in code. One includes a hidden warning. Turn back. It's a trap. You leave that version somewhere obvious, just in case that's how real pirate treasure stayed hidden. Not through secrecy, but through confusion. Misdirection. Contradiction. By the time someone actually finds the right map, the spoon's rusted and the cat's broken. But that's fine, because it was never really about the loot. It was about the idea of the loot. You add the finishing touches, some wave patterns, an ominous crow in the corner, and a blot that looks vaguely like a squid if you squint and tilt your head. You label it, Beware the Ink Beast. A joke for future generations. As night falls. The map dries in your lap, crinkling slightly as the sea breeze whispers through the rigging. You roll it carefully and slide it into a tin tube, now officially the only known map to the buried treasure, which is a lie, of course. But that's the tradition. You hand it to the captain with a flourish. He grins like a man who's just sealed a legacy. You think anyone will find it? He asks. You nod slowly. Eventually, but you both know the truth. The porcelain cat will outlive you all. Sometimes, you make a map just to pass the time. Not to find treasure. Not to bury secrets. Just to chart nothing. Pure, delicious, empty ocean. And sometimes, those are the most peaceful maps of all. Today, the ship is becalmed. Motionless in a sea, so still it might as well be glass. The sails hang like forgotten laundry. The crew is subdued, lounging in pools of shade, whispering stories, or napping in loose hammocks. No storms. No was. Not even an ambitious goal. You do the only thing that makes sense. You chart the nothing. You take out a fresh sheet of parchment, rare, crisp, full of potential, and begin. You start with waves. Line after gentle line of ink swirled motion. Wide arcs. Faint curls. Nothing dramatic. No reefs. No monsters. No islands in sight. Just water. Then you add drift. A slow spiral. Not marked with direction or speed. Just the sensation of moving, barely, gently, as if being tugged by the world's slowest hand. Historians still debate whether pirates ever bothered to chart empty stretches of sea. Why waste ink on nothingness? But there's some evidence they did. Maps covered in flowing lines, wind symbols, even doodles of floating barrels or sleeping mermaids. Not for navigation, perhaps, but for meditation. You add a floating barrel. Label it friendly barrel, do not kick. Add a few jellyfish, just circles with lazy tentacles. They trail across the map like sleepy dancers. You feel calmer already. The cook wanders by and glances at your map. Where's it lead? He asks. Nowhere. He stares at it for a long time, then nods. Sound about right. He leaves you a slice of pear, then ambles off. You add the pear to the map. Draw a compass rose around it. The fruitful north. You label it, even though you're well aware it's the wrong direction. That's the point that a seagull lands nearby and squawks once. You add it to the map, too. Visiting scholar, probably judgmental. You give him a monocle and a diploma for reasons known only to you and possibly the gull. The map becomes a kind of diary. You note the position of a distant cloud. Sketch a vague ripple that might be a breeze. Then write, stillness observed here. Third day. Mood, contemplative. Socks damp. You lean back and look at your work. It's absurd. It's gentle. It's exactly the kind of map no one will ever use. But it serves a purpose. The sea, in its endless blue expanse, can make a pirate feel small. Untethered. Lost between one promise of gold and the next. This map of nothing, says you are here. Not rushing. Not fighting. Just here. You add a label in looping script, Sea of the Mind. It sounds profound, a little mysterious. It might even make someone feel smarter just for reading it. A junior crewmate wanders over and asks, "What's this weird spiral bit?" You consider. "That's the drift of thought," you say. "Don't get caught in it." She nods as if this is obvious wisdom and traces it with one finger. "I like it," she says. You smile. So DWI sunset, the wind finally stirs. The sails flutter, then snap to attention. The ship creaks, shifts, and begins to move. The map is complete. You roll it carefully, label the outside for days when there is no destination, and tuck it into the lowest drawer of your chest, beside a dried mango rind and 2 forgotten buttons. You know it won't be used in any voyage log or captain's archive, but one day someone might find it, unroll it, and smile. And maybe, just maybe, that will be enough. Some maps are made for glory, some for revenge. But occasionally, rarely, you're asked to make a map for romance. Which, if you've ever spent time aboard a pirate vessel, is about as common as finding a clean sock or a polite parrot. But here you are, sketching a coastline shaped like a heart. Con.it started with Pockets. Real name, Bartok, but no one calls him that anymore. One night, slightly more rum than man, he slumped against your shoulder and said, "I want to give her a map. Not of treasure. Of me." You stared. "Of you, my love," he whispered dramatically, gesturing vaguely toward the stars. "I want to chart it. She deserves that." You didn't argue. You just got out the good parchment. Now, you find yourself creating the first and possibly only pirate romance map, a navigational love letter riddled with metaphors, questionable geography, and highly debatable sincerity. You begin with Bay of First Glances. Gentle curve, soft surf. Then Mount Doubt, which leads, if you squint, to Cove of Second Chances. You're not sure who this woman is, but you imagine she'll either be flattered or very confused. Historians still argue whether pirates had the time or inclination for courtship. Most documentation focuses on plunder, punishment, or pickled vegetables. But a few scraps exist: letters, charms, initials carved into ship rails. Love, it seems, survived even the stink of bilge water. Back on the map, you add Isle of Misunderstandings surrounded by waters of apology, depth unknown. Pockets insist there should be a bridge of some kind to symbolize growth. You sigh and draw a rope bridge. It immediately looks unsafe. You add a tiny crab holding a warning flag. Then comes the compass rose, each point labeled not with direction, but emotion. North is hope. East is fear. South lust. West lunch. Pockets insisted. He claimed feelings are stronger when you're well fed. You embellish with flourishes. Decorative vines wrapping around the coastlines. A cloud shaped like a heart pierced by a dagger. And then soften it with a tiny note in the corner. Map may not be to scale or based in reality. Pockets leans in. Make sure there's a path back to her, yeah? So you do. A dotted trail that winds from the valley of foolish words to the cliffs of regret, then crosses Forgiveness Bay and arrives at a modest hut labeled her firelight. You even draw a wisp of smoke curling from the chimney. You ask him her name. He just shrugs. She said it once, but it got lost somewhere in the salt spray. He frowns. Or maybe I just forgot. You don't even know if she's still in the same port. But Pockets remembers the way her scarf fluttered in the wind. He remembers the way she served him soup, even though he didn't pay. He remembers the kindness in her silence, more than her voice. Oh, you honor that. You draw a little bowl of soup next to the hut. Carve the words for warmth that asked nothing into the imaginary doorframe. Pockets gets quiet. Then he suddenly insists the map needs monsters. Every good romance has danger, he says to "Oh, you oblige." At a sea of self-doubt, patrolled by anxious octopuses. Place the reefs of miscommunication near the cove, treacherous, jagged, and labeled navigable only with patience. You add a storm cloud that follows no winds, called the mood. Pockets looks at all this, and something flickers in him. You think she'll understand it? He asks. You look at the swirling metaphors, the emotional topography, the badly proportioned mountain of trust issues, and you say, absolutely not. He laughs. Then he says, good. You add a wind current, blowing toward the heart-shaped harbor. Fate. You label it as the map nears completion. Other crewmates gather around, offering suggestions. One recommends a shortcut through the strait of shared laughter. Another wants a waterfall called Tears We Pretended Weren't. The cook insists on including a bakery. No one stays in love on an empty stomach. You pencil in a tiny bakehouse with warm steam rising and label it, She Always Knew How to Rise. Eventually, the map becomes more than Pocket's story. It becomes everyone's. A shared memory of loves lost, loves imagined, and love still may be waiting. The deck falls silent, just the soft scratch of your pen, the creak of wood, and the occasional sniffle from Jenkins, who claims it's just allergies. You roll the map slowly. Tie it with ribbon stolen from a merchant's bonnet 3 ports back. Hand it to Pockets like you're passing him his own heart. He holds it gently, reverently. Later that night, you hear he's asked the quartermaster for courier pay. Says he wants to send it to her. Wherever she is. No address, just hope. Maybe it'll find her. Maybe not. But the next morning, you see Pockets staring off at the sea, a strange peace in his posture. And you know, somewhere out there, folded in ribbon and wrapped in longing, floats a map not drawn for gold or revenge, but for love. Pirates weren't always the best at planning, but they were masters of improvisation. And nowhere was this more apparent than in the noble tradition of last-minute maps, scribbled scraps created 5 minutes before a landing, a duel, or a desperate escape. And right now, you're making one that you're hunched on the floor of the captain's quarters, using a charcoal nub and the back of a biscuit wrapper. Why the rush? Well, the captain has just informed you, with the casual tone of a man describing weather, that you're sailing straight into a smuggler's cove with 4 possible exits, 2 hostile factions, and exactly 0 reliable landmarks. You'll draw us a map, he said. Shouldn't take more than a minute. Of course. Easy. Oh, now you're trying to recall every vaguely accurate rumor about Splitjaw Bay. The name, you vaguely recall, comes from the jagged shape of its twin rock formations, or possibly from a very angry eel someone saw there once. Historians still argue whether the bay was named after geography or aquatic violence. You begin with the basic layout, 2 rocky outcrops that resemble broken teeth if you squint through a rum haze. Then a shallow inlet, a narrow beach, and, if memory serves, a patch of suspiciously purple reeds. You add those. Reeds never lie. Then come the challenges, escape routes. You mark them quickly. Tunnel of Regret, Climber's Folly, Splashy Way. You don't know if any of these names are real, but they sound just plausible enough that a crew member glances over your shoulder. Is that north? You pause. It's emotionally north. He nods, satisfied. You scribble in landmarks as fast as your hand allows. Old goat skeleton, honor it. Tree that hates you, definitely not a trap, probably a trap. Maps like this weren't uncommon in pirate life. 1 second you're gambling over salted fish. The next you're planning a high-stakes heist involving 3 dinghies and a monkey wearing boots. The cartography? Invented on the fly, often with whatever was available. Napkins, driftwood, someone's back. The quartermaster bursts in. We land in 20 minutes. You respond by drawing a large arrow labeled, Do Not Go Here. It's unclear whether that's a warning or reverse psychology. Either way, you add a skull for effect. And then, because pirate maps always need something unnecessary, you sketch in a kraken. Just 1 tentacle, curling from the bay's edge. You label it, Mood Pending. The map now resembles a treasure hunt designed by a sleep-deprived poet, which is to say, perfectly accurate for pirates. You hand it to the captain. He stares at it, then at you, then back at the biscuit wrapper masterpiece. This'll get us through? You give your best confident shrug. If it doesn't, we weren't meant to get through. He nods solemnly. True. And off the crew goes, storming the beach with your hastily doodled guidance. You watch from the deck, holding your breath as they disappear into the reeds. For a moment, nothing, then a cheer. Apparently, Climber's Folly wasn't a dead end, and the tree that hates you provided shade for a stolen stash of brandy. Miracles, as always, prefer chaos. Back aboard, You take the leftover charcoal and begin copying the map onto cleaner parchment, just in case. You add a legend this time. Skull and crossbones equals possible ambush herb equals safe-ish goat equals ghost of goat rumored to bless left-handed thieves. You feel oddly proud of this one. Last-minute maps rarely survive. They're too fragile, too absurd, too smudged with urgency. But every once in a while, they outlive the people who made them. Tucked into barrels. Forgotten in coat linings. Rediscovered years later by wide-eyed children convinced they've found a secret path to pirate gold. And who's to say they haven't? After all, you just drew a map that led directly to brandy, safety, and at least one exciting argument with a territorial parrot. If that's not treasure, what is? You've made maps for love, for revenge, and for sheer survival. But now, you've been tasked with something even stranger, a training map. Yes, an instructional diagram for the newest recruits. A how-to guide in cartographic form, meant to teach green sailors how to think like pirates, the captain's idea. He calls it the map of reasonable expectations. You suspect irony. You spread out a fresh sheet of vellum, sigh deeply, and begin with a wide, open sea. Label it Things You Were Promised. Then draw a tiny dot in the corner, what you'll actually get. The recruits, four nervous faces fresh from coastal towns, are watching with intense focus. One already has a notebook. Another is holding a spoon for no clear reason. You begin narrating as you draw. This here is the Isle of Constant Seasickness. You explain. You'll visit it often, sometimes twice a day. One recruit raises a hand. Is that a real island? No, you say, but the vomiting is very real. You continue. To the south, you sketch a mangrove swamp labeled where the good boots go to die. To the east, a vast expanse named the deck you'll swab for all eternity. One of them chuckles nervously. Historians still argue whether pirate captains trained their crews in any formal sense. Most agree the method was less instruction and more shouting until someone got it right. But a few old logs mention drawings, diagrams, and even choreographed boarding drills. You suspect those are the more successful ships, or at least the better organized mutinies. Back on the map, you draw a compass rose made entirely of spoons. Why? Because the new guy still hasn't put his down, and at this point, it's part of the narrative. You label it Direction of Whim. Then you move on to the Bay of Overconfidence, a notoriously crowded area. You add a few dashed lines showing all the routes ships have taken into this bay, each ending abruptly in scribbled spirals and sad little shipwreck icons. The recruits lean in. Next, you diagram captain's orders, represented by a thick line that immediately forks in four directions. Literal interpretation, reasonable interpretation, what he meant, possibly, and you're fired. One recruit snorts. The others take notes. To the north, you draw a swirling mess called rum logistics. A complex system of barrels, locks, secret stashes, and Jenkins's bunk. You add a tiny skull near it and write, "Do not touch unless you enjoy loud apologies." You turn to the crew. This area, you explain, is known as the promise of shore leave. You'll approach it many times. You'll almost reach it. You will never actually land. You illustrate it with a perfect beach, white sand, palm trees, and a small figure diving joyfully into the waves. Then a huge arrow swooping the ship away. Sudden orders, you label it. And then, for balance, you draw the lagoon of unexpected delight. A quiet cove where the crew once found honey, a flock of singing finches, and a goat that played fetch. One of the recruits looks skeptical. "It's real," you say. "Well, mostly." The goat was unusually cooperative. To finish, you draw a winding trail marked your progress. It loops through every region, up cliffs of confusion, down into ravines of discovery, through fog banks of sleep deprivation. But eventually, it leads to a little spot marked. One day, you'll know what you're doing. And next to it, a smaller label, sort of. You roll the map, tie it with string, and hand it to the nearest recruit. He cradles it like a sacred text. "Study that," you say. "And if you get lost, remember, so is everyone else." They laugh. A little too hard. One might be crying. It's hard to tell, but they walk away straighter, a little braver, a little less like tourists and more like pirates in the making. And you, for once, feel like a cartographer, not of confusion, but of clarity at least until Jenkins steals the spoon compass. The map before you isn't yours. You found it tucked inside a sea chest at the back of the storage hold, wrapped in oilcloth, stained with salt, and reeking faintly of nutmeg and bad decisions. It's old, not ancient, but seasoned. It has that special kind of fold pattern that only comes from years of nervous hands consulting it in dim candlelight. And what's on it? Something you weren't expecting. Recipes. First glance. The parchment looks like a standard navigational chart. Compass rose, a few islets, some swirling wave lines. But then you spot the labels. Bay of Simmer, Cape of Brine, the Great Eel Passage, lightly salted. It's a culinary map, and suddenly, everything makes sense. That strange corner drawing that looked like a squid attacking a lemon? It's actually a braised calamari recipe with notes on presentation. That spiral trail through Pickler Sound details fermentation times by season. The Isle of Biscuit regret. Ingredients, baking temperature, and an angry warning. Do not substitute goose fat. You stare, awed. Historians still debate whether pirate cooks were given as much power as their navigators. Some ships did. One Portuguese log mentions a cook being declared essential personnel after inventing clove-spiced sea beef. Others not so much. But this map? This feels like the work of someone deeply passionate about food. And also, possibly, vengeance. You turn the map over. A single note, faded by time, is scratched into the back. To feed a crew is to rule their hearts. It's signed only with a small sketch of a turnip holding a cutlass. Back on the front, you try to follow a route labeled 3-Day Stew Channel. The directions are vague, but poetic. Begin at sunrise, when onions cry. Stir as you sail south of the salt line. Add meat when the second mate swears. Simmer until morale improves. Some of the recipes are practical. Pickled sea cabbage, flatbread you can bake on a shovel, dried mango leather, which turns out to be just mango in the sun. Others are more conceptual. There's a pudding that requires whale watching and whispered encouragement. A tart that must only be eaten during full moon crossings. A fermented oyster dish called Crew Divider, with a drawing of a fist fight beside it. And one corner of the map is entirely dedicated to beverages. Tinctures, grogs, mysterious elixirs with names like Numb Tongue and Captain's Regret, Extra Foam. You follow the tea route, a curving string of islands where herbal brews are steeped according to lunar phases. One blend promises clarity. Another promises sleep. A third warns, only drink if heartbroken or dangerously bored. You wonder who made this. Was it a wandering cook? A culinary cult? A pirate who got tired of hardtack and decided to document joy instead? Jenkins appears at your elbow. Smells like nutmeg, he mutters, then squints at a drawing of what looks like a shrimp skewered on a cutlass. That's battle shrimp, he adds, nodding solemnly. Only served before duels. You're not sure whether to believe him. Still, the map ignites something in you. You take out your own parchment and begin copying elements. Not exact replicas, but inspired sketches. A route of restorative broths. A bay of buttered silence. A region labeled where the garlic whispers. You start taking notes, doodling flavors, imagining meals that could soothe the crew after storms, hangovers, or heartbreaks. This isn't treasure, at least not the golden gem variety, but it feels valuable. Later, you'll share a dish with the crew, honey-glazed eel on dry biscuit. They'll groan at first, then they'll ask for seconds. You'll pretend not to smile, and, tucked in your satchel, the culinary map will stay safe. A reminder that not all voyages end in treasure. Some end in a meal, a story, a flavor that outlasts the salt and chaos. And on stormy nights, when rations grow thin and tempers thinner, you'll pull it out, point to the corner with the battle shrimp, and say, let's make this one, just to feel alive again. Because pirates don't only sail for gold. Sometimes they sail for taste. There's a drawer in your cabin that no one else touches. That it's not locked, not secret. just ignored, the way people ignore old sea charts with curling corners and places no one believes exist anymore. Inside that drawer lies your map of nowhere. The T didn't start as a map, just a doodle, a lazy scribble on a slow morning when the tide refused to rise. But now it stretches across 6 stitched-together scraps of vellum, faded with sweat, sea mist, and time. I T-chart a place that doesn't exist, a floating harbor made of driftwood and half-forgotten lullabies. A port where ships trade stories instead of cargo, where every street curves like a question mark, and the tavern only serves what you miss most. You add to it in secret. Late nights, long watches, whenever the crew is asleep or too busy arguing about who stole the spoon compass again. The harbor is called Whispers Inn now. It's grown, new districts, new statues, an oddly aggressive bakery known for its existential pies. The last pie you drew had a slice missing and a note that read, "Who took this? And what did it cost them?" Historians would never classify this as a proper chart. It lacks scale, it lacks function, it ignores physics. But in pirate lore, dream maps weren't unheard of. Mariners drew them to cope, to imagine better places, to give shape to longing. You once showed it to Jenkins. He stared a long time, then simply said, "I used to dream of a library like that one." You hadn't told him it was a library. You nod. You begin to label the corners with memories. The dock where I didn't say goodbye. The lantern I never lit. The room where she waited. You sketch in a small windmill that never turns, a cat with a monocle, possibly from an earlier map, and a lighthouse powered entirely by regrets. The light beams sweep lazily across the edges of the paper, warming nothing, guiding no one, and still, you feel comforted. Every pirate, you realize, carries a map like this. Maybe not on parchment, maybe not with ink, but inside. An internal compass that doesn't point north, but backward, to home, to things you missed, to versions of yourself left behind at forgotten ports. You draw a new alley in Whisper's End, one that twists back toward the sea. You label it the way back, if you still want it. Then, next to the bakery, you draw a statue, a figure looking out at nothing. The plaque reads, "Here stood the one who mapped what couldn't be found." The ship creaks. The candle sputters. You fold the map of nowhere and tuck it back into the drawer. You don't need it to be real. It already is, because a pirate's truest map isn't made to find something, it's made to remember who you were when you were still looking. Now the ink dries. The candle shortens. The waves whisper against the hull, soft as old lullabies, patient as memory. You lie back, eyes fluttering closed, and the maps you've drawn, real and imagined, unfurl behind your lids. Trails of salt and scribble, bays of what-ifs, harbors full of maybes. Somewhere, a spoon compass spins slowly, unbothered by direction. Somewhere else, a porcelain cat guards a buried dream, still wearing its scarf. And in a drawer not far from your bunk, a place that doesn't exist waits quietly, as it always has. You exhale. The creak of wood, the hush of sails, the steady rhythm of the sea, all lull you deeper into stillness. No storms, no treasure hunts, no shouting captains or mysterious eels. Just this, the gentle hush of night, the long exhale of time, the slow, silly cartography of sleep. You don't need to know where you're going, that you've already drawn the way there. Sweet dreams, sailor.